Welcome to the Down South Hunting Podcast. This is Mike Higman. Got Adam Cruz here with me, and we got a really cool episode coming up where we're going to be going over a lot of turkey calls, how to do them, when to do them, all that kind of stuff. And I know it's opening day for a lot of the South today, March 15th. And if not today, I know your day's coming soon. Adam, are you getting excited?
Hey man, I'm always ready for turkey season. I saw a poll online the other day about, which was your favorite whitetail season, turkey season, all these other seasons. My favorite is always the one that's coming up next. That's just my attitude.
So what's after turkey season?
Oh, it's all deer, man. It's there is no Western big game hunt for me this year, so I am 100% focused on deer season after turkey season's over with.
Speaking of no Western big game hunt this year, do you have any news for us?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, my news. Yes.
Oh yeah, well, you know how you had a baby this week?
There's two things that my life will revolve around, I guess, in my mind. That's podcasting and work. Yes, very blessed and thankful to have a 9-pound, 4-ounce bouncing baby boy. And I got a new hunting partner. That's 3 boys for me. I am extremely happy, but I'm also tapped out on kids, I think. So not the greatest timing with turkey season coming, but hey, things happen.
Yeah, I mean, you could have told her to have a little bit earlier.
Well, she was 2 weeks late, but I mean, we could have went 1 month earlier. Would have really helped, I think.
I think it was just conspiring to mess up your hunting season.
It's always something, man. Something always mess up like that. The preseason scouting and getting in there, being prepared. What's another baby? It's good.
So what are your plans for the season? When's Tennessee open up?
So the youth season opens up around March 26th. I know I've got that date wrong. The opening day is in March, but it's barely in March. It's usually like that first week in April. I actually have my 6-year-old wants to go on the juvenile hunt. We have him rigged out with like a little Mossberg 510 mini and a 20 gauge that kind of kicks like a mule since it's only about 5 pounds, but he's all amped and ready to go. I'll do that hunt first. Then I'm going to do a public land hunt on opening day. And I've got a piece of private property, kind of small, but close to home. I'll get to hunt that throughout some of the year. And really, man, turkey season is just going to be hunt when I have the opportunity with 3 kids, 2 of them playing baseball and football. Like, it's just going to be go, go, go and hunt when possible. So I'm thinking probably a lot of early morning hunts, maybe some later in the afternoon hunts, and kind of missing my favorite time, which is right in the middle of the day, because that's when I seem to kill the majority of my birds. But I'm going to make the best of it, and I'm looking forward to it. How about you? Are you going to do any turkey hunting this year, or how's your schedule looking?
Man, I'm kind of in the same boat as you with we're like full on softball season, baseball season. I got kids in gymnastics. So I've been looking forward to turkey season for a little while here. And now that it's getting close, I'm looking at the schedule and I got no idea when I'm going to be able to get it in. It's basically, I'm in the same boat, except add in a 3.5-hour drive each way to go hunting. So I think I'm probably going to be able to get a hunt or 2 in. That's, my goal is to maybe get 2, full day hunts in this year. So that might be, 1 day, 1 weekend, and 1 day, another weekend, or, I have a permit to some decent public land. So, I've got some things in the works. I'm definitely planning on going, but I'm realistic about the chance that my opportunity is going to be real limited. So the thing is, turkey hunting does excite me, and even if I don't get to go a lot this year, I'm trying to build my knowledge base and that kind of stuff. I need to get some experience, obviously. But this episode that we've got here with Shane was really good for me. I'm excited about just practicing my calling along with this. Shane did a great job of explaining how to do some of these calls, and I'm just looking forward to having something I can have as a podcast and replay as many times as I want, just practicing while I'm riding in the car. And I hope that's something everybody can enjoy quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to go out and buy DVD. You don't have to keep up with the MP3 files. Like, you just go back each and every time that you want to practice your calls before season or after season, during season, and just continue to go back to this, and it's there. I think this is a great idea to help other hunters.
Shane had a ton of good content to share as far as like stories and tips and basically his history with turkey hunting and that kind of stuff. So we had an interview portion first, and then we get into the calling. And what Adam and I decided to do is we are going to release a second podcast. It's going to be the same day. So episode 32 is going to be this one. 33 is going to be just the calling. So you can keep going back and have just the calling and not go through the whole interview portion in the future. If you want to help the podcast out, every opportunity you get, download it when you're going to do it again. Because if you listen like I do, basically if you don't listen to the whole episode, it'll keep it as new. But the way we can attract sponsors and even guests and that kind of stuff is by increasing our download count. So if that's something you use all the time, it'd be great if you could, if you're listening to it a bunch, just re-download it every once in a while. A couple things, along with helping us out, if you could subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done it yet, if you're a new listener and haven't got around to it, that helps us out a whole bunch. And of course, ratings and reviews, you hear it on all the podcasts. Everybody wants them. If this is something that you enjoy and you get something out of, and it's something you want us to keep doing, we need your help. And you can help out by just give us a rating or review and subscribe, and also telling all your hunting buddies about it would be great too. The podcast is growing, and we're getting close to signing up some sponsors. So anything you guys can do to help us out, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we have some really good deals in the works with potential sponsors, and we're also very available on Facebook in the Hunting in the South Facebook group. I can't stress to you enough how much fun it is to talk with other hunters across the South. And heck, we've got guys in the Midwest, out West, Northeast that really engage there too. So definitely look us up, Hunting in the South, on the Facebook.
And finally, let's not forget about hunting gear deals. It's the off season for deer season. If you're going to be buying any gear coming up here, even turkey gear, we've got broadheads, decoys, camo, all that kind of stuff. Or if you just want to be able to save a lot of money before next deer season, it's a great time to buy stuff there as well. So huntinggeardeals.com. Let's go ahead and jump into this interview with Shane. I know this is going to be a long one, but it's really good. So we just need to get out of the way, Adam.
That's what we usually need to do, is get out of the way.
All right, let's do it.
And tonight we have on the line Shane Simpson from CallingAllTurkeys.com. We've had in our mind, as we got closer to turkey season, that we wanted to have someone on the show that could run through all the different turkey calls. And who better to do that than a guy that has a website called CallingAllTurkeys.com that has ran calling competitions nationally, regionally. I know he's a state champion, but I'll let him give his bio. Shane, thank you for coming on the phone. How are you doing tonight?
I'm not too bad myself. I'm a little tired. It's been some long days here building up to turkey season. I've got a lot of work still ahead of me, and I'm headed off to Florida here in another 10 days. But I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad you guys invited me on the show. I listened to the show last couple of podcasts and really enjoyable listening to those. So it was kind of an honor to be requested to be on the show. So thank you.
Hey, we appreciate you coming on. Can you tell us a little bit about you? Give us some background on your turkey hunting, and tell us a little bit about CallingAllTurkeys.com.
Let's see. If you can tell by my accent, if I still have one, I'm originally from South Carolina. I've been told from my family when I go visit that I'm starting to lose my accent. So at any rate, I've been here in Minnesota for about 10 years now. I actually started turkey hunting when, I started hunting, heck, I don't even remember. I was, basically when I was old enough to walk and shoot a BB gun, I started doing things out in the woods and around the house. We had a little bit of land down in South Carolina, and I don't really recall how I got my start in turkey hunting. I think I wanted to do any type of hunting that whenever the season came open. I had an older brother that hunted, and I kind of looked up to him, and so I kind of wanted to do the things he did, and he hunted, so I wanted to hunt. And I recall probably one of my earliest recollections of turkey hunting. I remember going back in the woods with my older brother's shotgun and just walking around basically looking for a turkey. I had no clue what I was doing. And ran into this fellow on the public land that butted up to our private land, and he asked me what I was doing, and I told him I was attempting a turkey hunt. He actually pulled a turkey call, mouth call out of his backpack, unopened, of course, and gave it to me and said, here, learn how to use this call. Sit down against a tree, and gave me all the basics of turkey calling. Sit down against a tree and make some calls every once in a while and sit still and keep your eyes open, and pretty soon a turkey will come in. So that's kind of how I got my start in turkey hunting. I actually called in a bird that first year. I didn't kill one. He saw me moving and he ran off. And so I learned real quick that they had great eyesight. The following spring, I called in 2 birds on the opening day and 1 2 days later and killed both of those. So that was at a really young age. I think about 14. I'm thinking 13 or 14. And I've been hooked ever since. So
I guess you grew up in South Carolina. Now you're in Minnesota. So can you kind of give us the difference between hunting in the South versus up north with turkey?
There's a lot more farm country up here. So that's from where I was in South Carolina. A lot more pine plantations down there, more heavily wooded. So there's that difference. More ag, more open terrain. There's eastern wild turkeys up here. Eastern wild turkeys in South Carolina. The strategies are not, there's not a huge difference in the strategies other than what you would apply for hunting open terrain turkeys versus wooded turkeys. That's about the only difference. And you can find that anywhere in the country. You can find open terrain in South Carolina. So I wouldn't say there's a huge difference. Now, the turkey population up here, or turkey hunting in general, is relatively new to Minnesota and to the upper Midwest. And when I say new, I don't mean the last few years. It's been up here for quite a while, but not near as long as it was in South Carolina. And so you don't have near the turkey hunter numbers as you do in the South. So the birds are, I'm going to say they're not quite as pressured. They seem to be just a little bit easier to call, depending on where you go, where you're at. But in general, they're typically it's about the same style of hunting between the two.
Now, so you're telling me that it's just as hard to kill a bird in Minnesota as it is in South Carolina. Did I get that right?
It says it's hard or it's easier to kill. I said that the strategies are about the same. I will say this: it's a lot easier to get permission to hunt private land up here. They haven't fell in love with the turkey as much as we did down in the South. On the flip side, you can't get permission to hunt deer anywhere in this country, it seems like. But most of the places you go to, I wouldn't say most, but there's a good chance if you go knock on 10 doors, you're going to have more than 2 or 3 of them that will give you permission to hunt, especially if it's a farmer. Back home, I gave up trying to get permission on private land just because it was always no. And that's basically where I got my start hunting public land. My dad sold our little 50 acres when I was young, not long after I started turkey hunting, so I had to resort to public land, and because I couldn't get permission on any other private land. And I actually kind of fell in love with the lure of hunting public land just because there was a little more challenge in it. You had to really do your homework. And also, one of the things that continues to draw me to public land today is the fact I don't have to ask permission to go in there. I buy a license, I can go back in there whenever I want. I've had permission on private land in the past, but you always got to check in with the landowner to make sure no one else is about it. Those sort of things. With public, I can come and go as I please. Now I do have to deal with other folks potentially hunting back there too, but that's a minor inconvenience. I just like the freedom of coming and going as I please, like I own the land. You know what I'm saying?
I've been following you for the last couple of years on your YouTube channel and that sort of thing, and it seems like you're hitting up quite a few states out west, in the South, and just different areas.
Yeah, typically it's about between 9 and 11 states a season, and it seems like a lot, but it's really not. I guess it is a lot to some people, and it's a lot to how I was early on. But I'm mostly hunting some of the same states, and I'm hunting states that are near me. Most of these states I can be there within 7 or 8 hours and hunt a day or 2 or 3, and then scoot back home and then go to work. Where I hunt in South Dakota is only 7 hours away. I can leave work, and I work weekends, so I get all my 40 hours in 3 days, and I'm off Monday through Thursday. So that's where I get all my time to hunt, and so I can leave work Sunday evening and drive through the night, and drive 7 hours, and then get a few hours sleep, and then start hunting. So, but I hunt relatively nearby a lot of states. South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Wisconsin. All those are within easy driving distance. So there's 4 states right there. You add North Dakota with or was that 5 states? You add North Dakota on a reservation tag. There's another one that's not too far away from me, being up here in Minnesota. But I do travel. I usually try to have one big trip each season where I cover 2 long distance states. Like this year will be Florida and Alabama. This year I actually added a second long trip where I'll hit New York State and Virginia. And so those are kind of my 4 long distance states this year. And then the rest of them will be these local states: Wisconsin, Nebraska, Kansas. I'm actually going to hit Missouri also because I'm going to Kansas. So I figure I'd scoot in there, get a day or 2 hunt. And not all of these states do I hunt myself. Some of them I'm just filming. So I'm not killing turkeys and buying tags for every state every season.
Are you getting with an outfitter here in Florida, or you got some private land, or doing public? How are you going to do that hunt?
That is a public land hunt again. I've never hunted Florida except for on public land, and I've been there. This will be like the 5th time I've been there. And I don't want people to look at it and say, "Wow, he's a master of the public land." We're drawing quota hunts where the number of hunters are lower, and so we apply for these quota hunts every year. And when we draw them, it's public land, but it's a little more. If you know about the quota hunts down in Florida, they limit the number of hunters that go in there each week, and so you don't have it's like some of the general public land down there. There's a line of cars and just a pile of people waiting at the gate to get in there, and so it can be a real circus in those general access public lands. So I try to, when I go to Florida, I try to get these quota hunts or special opportunity hunts where the pressure is limited. It's, obviously a lot cheaper than an outfitter, but the odds are still good that you're going to tag a bird. We've been successful every year we went, or I say we, it's me, or whoever I'm hunting with, but every year we managed to kill at least 1 bird, so it's been good in that regard.
I guess without asking you to be too specific, are you hunting like the real southern part where the season starts the earliest, or are you hunting more the middle area where you're still in the Osceolas but it's not the early season, or is it North Florida?
I'm hunting the central part of the state, not in the south zone. That started, when did that start? Last week or this weekend?
Yeah, I think it was just last weekend. Yep.
Yeah, I'm hunting around Orlando. We actually have 2 tags for 2 different public spots. One's just north of Orlando, and one's about an hour south of Orlando. The one I'm going to south of Orlando is Fort Drum WMA. I will tell you that, and that's the one I won't share the other one because I don't know if the fellow wants me sharing that one. But
okay.
But anyway, I'm hunting Fort Drum, and I hunted this one back in 2010 with my nephew, Preston. If you've seen those videos with him, I'm not sure if that video is still on YouTube, because some of the older ones I take off after they get really old, and I'm kind of embarrassed by how I edited the video. They're a little more polished these days, so I'm not so quite embarrassed about the quality of them. But I'm really excited to go to that track of public land because that was the first time I ever hunted Florida, and I want to see some of these, especially these 2 locations where he missed a bird the first morning, and he was almost in tears that morning. You don't see that on any of the footage, but it really took the wind out of his sails that first morning. He missed that bird. He thought it was the only opportunity he was going to ever get to get a Osceola. And then the second morning, he called another one in and he killed it. And you could Wow. I have to post that clip up sometimes. He was so excited about killing that turkey. And I wanted to go visit those 2 locations where we set up and just get some footage there. Maybe even try to kill a turkey in that spot, even if it maybe hurts my chances. It'd be cool to just sit in those spots again.
That'd be pretty neat. Well, our regular listeners will know I don't have a whole lot to offer as far as advice when it comes to turkey hunting, but I can actually help out for those that are interested in getting an Osceola in Florida. The way our quota system is set up is you get points every time you don't draw, and those points will help you get a tougher tag. So even if you're not planning, you know, a lot like out west, even if you're not planning on doing it this year, next, it's a good idea to put into the draw. So basically, the draw for spring turkey happens, I believe, in November. I know it's in the fall. I think it's in November. Um, and if you're not going this year, just put in for like a real tough to get hunt. You know, just put in for one, and then you'll get your tag. It's free. So you might need a management area permit to be able to enter the drawing, which those are like $26. I'm not sure about that. I have one every year, so I'm not sure about that. But I'd say go ahead and start putting in.
Yeah, you can apply as many times as you want. There are 5, unless we're talking about 2 different things. I know that the ones we apply for you is $5 per application, and you can put $100 in there and 20 applications in. I don't know I don't know anything about the preference points. That's probably your specialty because.
Yep. So what you're talking about is a little bit different than what I'm talking about. So this might be good info for you too. So what you're talking about is called a special opportunity permit, and I think it's like what you're saying. It's like $5 per entry, and if you get drawn, it's $100 for the tag. What I'm talking about is they're just limited entry quotas. So there's no price for the tag. There's no price for ending the drawing, and there's no price if you draw it. It's other than your state license and your management area permit. But some of those areas, it might be, it's hundreds of acres and they let 10, 20 hunters in the entire season. So you can check that on it's myfwc.com. So the only reason I bring that up is if you're listening now, and yeah, obviously you didn't draw this year, but some of the better tags, it's going to take 5 or 6 years to get enough points to get drawn for it. I will say one other thing. Actually, even if you didn't draw, maybe some of my Florida brethren are going to hate me for saying this, but every single week there's an opportunity to return your tag. And the reason somebody might return it is they can't go, and you get all your points back if you return that tag. And if you return it in time, there's time to be redrawn, and every single week there's a redraw. So let's say you didn't even draw one, you could still be putting in every single week this year, and there's no charge to put in for that drawing. So, if it's something you can, the only thing I'll say is if you're going to put in for those redraws, I'd say please use them, because there's a lot of people out there that are entering those every week. Hate to see those go to waste. Somebody enter for that redraw, they get drawn, and then they don't show up for the hunt. So, anyway, that's a big sidetrack, but that probably could help some people out that want to come down and hunt Osceolas here in Florida.
That's probably why I don't know anything about the other ones, because all I ever apply for is the special opportunity hunts. My buddy applies for the quota hunts, and it's probably something. I didn't know that you only get one application for that, but it's free, correct?
Yeah, and you get 5 choices. So when you enter that one in the fall, you put in your top 5 choices, 1 through 5, and if you got 0 preference points, you're probably not going to get any of the top 5 ones. I think somehow the math works out. There might be a minute chance, but basically, once you get enough points, it's going to be like an automatic draw. But the best hunts are probably going to take you 5, 6, 7 points to get it, and as this system gets more popular, that number's probably going to go up.
And us non-residents get a little advantage in these drawings because they have to draw at least one non-resident. Like in these special opportunities, they have. I know in this special opportunity, the one I'm going to, they allow 5 hunters the first week and 5 the second week, or the second time they allow them in there. At least one of them had to be a non-resident. So, that actually puts really good odds in the non-residents' hands, in what I can tell. But at any rate, you guys don't go apply for it because it saved me room.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So Shane, can you kind of give us an idea how you got into competition calling, and maybe tell us about some of your successes with that?
Well, I do remember this. I don't remember the specific details. I think it may have been the Grand Nationals, the NWTF Grand National Calling Championships, and they must have been held in Charlotte. I was a kid. My older brother took me there to wherever it was, some type of hunting show or hunting convention. It might have been, I guess it would be the NWTF convention. I was really young. I don't recall it much. I do recall seeing the calling contest, and we went in there and watched it for a little while, and there was a room full of people. And watching these guys up on stage and compete, and they were producing what I thought at the time was some crazy good turkey sounds. And I was always a pretty shy kid early on. I didn't want to get in front of a lot of people. I still don't want to get in front of a lot of people and speak, but I saw those guys up there competing. I'm like, man, that's something I would really like to do, be on that stage and compete. But there's no way I could get the confidence up to get on that stage, I thought to myself. And so I just kind of put it in the back of my mind. It'd be cool, but I just knew I couldn't do it. Well, back in 2009, shortly after I moved to Minnesota, I was riding down the road and I saw a billboard for a sports show up here. And so I got home, I got online and checked the show out, see what the dates were, more details about it. And I saw that they were having a NWTF sanctioned turkey calling contest. And I'm like, oh, wow, I should go compete in this contest. No one up here knows who I am. I was always worried about being embarrassed by friends and people might know me in South Carolina. I was like, up here, no one knows who I am. If I get up there and make a fool of myself and sound like, crap up on that stage, no one will ever see me again. So I made the decision then to get up there and give it a try. Now, I was a pretty good owl hooter, I thought, but I was mainly concerned with competing in the turkey calling. I was just getting the guts to get up on that stage in front of all the people, and that was only 10 years ago, and if I tell you I would be afraid to get up on the stage in front of people, and then you look at me now, I'm still a little nervous when I get on stage, but not nearly as nervous as I was back then. I had butterflies just trying to get up on that stage. But at any rate, I got up there and competed, and I ended up placing third, and I was really excited about that. And afterwards, they had the owl hooting, and I was sitting there listening to all these guys owl hoot, and I'm like, wow, I think I might have been good enough to win that one. And I was kicking myself for not entering that one. I was always, I guess, a little better owl hooter than I was a turkey caller. But that got me hooked right there. I finally got up on that stage, and I guess getting third place was probably helped a little bit. And so as soon as I got home, I started searching for the next contest I could go to, and that's where it got started. For the first, 3 or 4 years, I was driving all over the place, Iowa, Wisconsin, you name it. If there was a contest within 10 hours or less of my home, I was driving to it to compete. And I really excelled at the owl hoot, and that kind of kept the drive going, and I kept working on my turkey calling until I finally got a win in that division. And so far, I haven't done great in the turkey calling at Grand Nationals, but I've brought home a gold trophy in the owl hooting twice. So I guess that's keeping my drive along, going along for going to Grand Nationals, and eventually, hopefully, I can bring me a big gold trophy home for the turkey calling aspect of it.
Shane, you mentioned having that sick feeling in your stomach as you got up on stage. Now, I've never been in a turkey calling competition. However, I have been sitting in the woods and thinking, okay, I can pull my calls out right now, and if I do this the right way, I can seal the deal. And sometimes I get what I feel like is stage fright, sitting underneath a tree, and everybody knows, that comes with practice, and the more you practice, the better you get, and the more confident you get. And I'm sure your confidence is crazy high after you've done really well in some competitions, and the time you get in the woods, you feel good about it. But what call do you feel the most comfortable with when you're in the woods and it's time to bring a turkey in?
I guess my go-to call, or it's basically cutting, is what I think is the magical call out in the woods. Gobblers just can't resist some aggressive, excited cutting. Of course, I'm gonna throw some yelps in that as well. But if I'm working a bird and I think I need to pull something out of the bag of tricks that's gonna seal the deal, that's the number one call I go to. That's the first one I start with. And then if that doesn't work, I go down in the bag and dig out other tricks as a last resort. But excited, aggressive cutting seems to be my favorite go-to call.
Would you use a mouth call?
The only two calls I carry out in the woods is a pot call and a mouth call. And the pot call is usually reserved for trying to strike birds or talk to them at a distance. I use a glass surface call. I actually got a new slate surface pot call this year from Hooks that I'm going to try. It sounds really good, but excuse me. In the past, I've been using a glass crystal surface pot call. It's just got a really high resonance to it. It carries a long ways, and I use that to reach out to a distance. Or if I'm trying to sound like two birds, I'll use it in conjunction with my mouth call. But my mouth call is my main go-to device for calling turkeys.
What's the difference between when you're doing a calling for a competition and a hunting situation? Or do you call differently for the two different scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty much being directed as what the judges want to hear, and in the woods, the turkeys are kind of dictating what they want to hear, and so but it's not as strict out there, of course. When you go on stage, they tell you a plain yelp of a hen. You give them, you got a minute time limit to do this plain yelp, and you give them a plain yelp, and you try to paint a picture of a hen walking, and then she just starts doing some plain yelps. And you got to condense that into a minute. Out in the turkey woods, you can have a little more freedom as far as how you present those calls. It's still a plain yelp. If you took a segment of a recording of me on stage and just a segment of me in the woods doing just the yelping part, I'm gonna do it exactly the same. It's gonna sound the same, but I may put more pauses or just string it out longer. I don't have a 1 minute time limit out there in the woods. I may add some clucks in there, or I may ramp up my yelping just a little bit, sound a little more excited. So, I mean, the calls themselves sound exactly the same whether you're on the stage or in the woods. It's just how you present them that's different.
So we're going to get into some of these individual calls, and before we do that, we wanted to kind of go over the call itself. How about we start with what should somebody look for when they're looking to buy a mouth call?
Do you have about 15 minutes? Well,
this is a podcast. We got all night, man.
Yeah. I'll give you, because it's not as simple as most people think. Hey, just grab this call, grab a 2-reed call, and try to make sounds on. There's a little more complexity to it, and I'll try to give it to you as briefly as possible. So when you're blowing a turkey call, and you notice how they all have different cuts in them. There's combo cuts, reverse combo, there's bat wings, there's ghost cuts, and for the longest, and myself included, turkey callers thought, I'll just pick this one up and it'll produce this sound. This one over here will give me a little more rasp. But there is some truth to that. But realistically, you need to pick a call that matches your airway. If you've seen that tutorial on my website, it explains it all. Basically, when you're blowing the call or air across the reeds, there's a little channel of air that blows right across the reeds, and it may not be in the same spot in your tongue or in your mouth across the reeds as it is in mine. The channel air in my mouth actually blows across the left side of the reeds, on the left side of the call, of a mouth call. Someone else may have it right down the middle. It's probably like Jesse Martin, you know who he is, the Grand National champion last year. He runs a ghost cut, and it's probably because his channel air is right down the middle, and he does a great job of running a ghost cut. I can't run a ghost cut because my channel air is off to the left. So when you're looking at calls and you wonder why, hey, I can run this combo cut, it sounds so much better than the other calls I run, it's probably because that gap's on the right-hand side and it's matching your airway. So a little advice I would give someone is pick up several calls with different cuts. Don't worry about who the call is from. You can worry about that later. Just pick 3 calls up that have different cuts, one in the middle, one on the right, one on the left, and play with those calls and see which one sounds the best. If it's a combo cut, then maybe start buying a combo cut from this manufacturer, and then maybe one from this one, and maybe one from another one, just to experiment with the different types of tensions and reed thicknesses they use, because each call maker is going to use different stretches. They'll put more tension or less tension, and that all affects the sound and how easy it is to use the call. myself personally, I put very little tension on these reeds, and I use really thin reeds. You suffer a little bit in the more aggressive calling on calls built like that. You can't really cut really hard because the reeds just can't handle it because they're so thin and so little tension on them. But it really makes the calls easy to blow. And so if you can find that right call that's cut for your airway with little tension and thin reeds, that's a really good call to start off on. Is that all that makes sense to you?
Yeah, that's actually really good. Being new to this, I'd never even heard that before. I see all the different ones, and oh, this one's got double, and this one's got triple, and this one's got more cuts in it, so it must be better. And this one has a big turkey on the package, so it must be the best. So, definitely good information from me.
Yeah, don't get caught up all in the hype of the name that they give you a fancy name. Look at the reed, that top reed that has a cut in it, and play around with different cut configurations. And then, and if you got a preference of a call maker, go to that call maker and say, hey, can you build me a call with a cut on this side of the call? And most of them will. So just try that first, play around with the cuts, and then go from there.
It's funny, Shane. I've been running mouth calls for, I guess, 20 years now. And one of the first ones I ever put in my mouth was a Mad Shipwreck. And it's got like a cut way off in the right corner. And for some reason, I couldn't find those for years. And I finally just started looking for the cuts to match it. And I figured out like, oh, okay, it's that cut that works. But I've never heard anyone put it as good as you did, like trying to identify the right mouth call for you. It is all about that cut, and you put it very well. So
let's say I buy that call, or maybe I buy 3 different calls. Is there anything I need to do when I first buy it to get it set up for me personally when I take it out of the package, or just run with it?
Well, when they make mouth calls, they often have the reeds coated in talcum powder or baby powder or some type of powder, and that's just because the latex is prone to problems with static. They'll stick to everything. And so when you're building calls, you're trying to stack the reeds, static becomes an issue with the reed actually jumps all over the table on its own. It's repelled from positive charge and negative charges and all that sort of thing. So it's coated in that powder to kind of reduce the static charge that it collects. So when you put it in your mouth, you're probably going to have that little powdery, chalky feeling in your mouth. So you can either rinse the call off before you start running it. I just throw the call in my mouth and get it nice and wet and then start running it. To me, it seems like they call it a break-in period for mouth calls, and this is true to some degree, depending on the type of latex that's being used. I like to run a call for a little bit and then let it dry out, and run that call again. Latex is an organic material. It's a natural material. It comes from trees, and so it will start to break down. And I think when you put it in your mouth and get it wet with your saliva and then let it dry out, it starts breaking that latex down a little bit. I guess it starts the digestive process, the enzymes in your spit. But it just seems to, after I do that a couple times, run it a little bit and let it dry, and run it a little bit and get it wet and then let it dry, that it kind of, I don't know, breaks those reeds down a little bit, even makes them a little tighter, a little thinner or something. But they always sound better after I've run them a few times. So that's how I really condition the call. I don't expect the sound that I hear when I first start running a brand new call to be the sound that I get, a few days later when I'm running it again. It should be fairly close, but there will be a slight change. If you pay attention, you can hear a subtle change in the pitch and tone you're getting from that call. Usually it starts sounding better.
Do you recommend cutting or bending the call at all? When you first get started with it?
No. I guess you could do it to your own liking, but the reed is the call is made with tension on it for and when you bend that frame, you're not just taking tension off that one reed. You're taking tension off all the reeds, and you can really screw up the sound. If I know people that do it and they like the sound they get from it, so I mean, there's no law preventing you from doing it. It's just if you want to keep the sound that call was built to or designed to create, don't touch that frame. And if you do bend it, you can always bend it back, and it should put the tension pretty close. But as a rule of thumb, I don't recommend ever bending the frame. Just if you don't like the sound the call's producing as is, search for a different call.
Okay. And what about cutting the edges to get a better seal in your mouth?
Oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with trimming the tape if you need to make it smaller. The tape on the calls I make, I actually pre-cut them smaller, and this not only helps. I mean, there's enough tape on it to produce that seal, but it helps reduce the gag reflex. If you put a mouth call in your mouth and it has a lot of tape on it, I don't know if it does it to you, but it causes me to kind of gag or dry heave a little bit there when I have the call with all that tape on it. So I like the calls with a little bit of tape and sometimes people, they don't like it because they're not used to it. But what I tell them is, if run the call for a few days or a week, and if you still don't like it, then get one with bigger tape. But I guarantee you, once you run it for a while, you won't go back. The same thing happened to me. I started running them with the tape pre-cut small, and after a week, I tried a bigger tape call, and I couldn't take it. I had to spit it out of my mouth. The smaller tape on calls, to me, not only reduces that gag reflex, but it allows me better control of the call. There's less tape pushing up against my teeth on either side. It's just a lot less, stuff in my mouth. But I'm able to work the call better. It seems like I can control what I do on the call, the sounds I produce, a little easier with less tape. So, but you can trim the tape. That's your question. You can trim the tape if you like. You're not going to hurt it. My advice is just make sure you try to trim it as evenly as possible, because that tape, if you have a lot more on one side than the other, that can kind of offset the call in your mouth, and then you mess up that airflow where it's hitting that cut reed in your call, and you might push it right out of alignment with your air channel. Now the call is incapable of producing sound because it's not in the right location. I told you I would ramble.
Now I'm eating this stuff up. So I got one last question about before we get in the calls, and I think Adam had a couple too. But is there anything specific with you making your own calls that you already mentioned them being a little bit softer and having a smaller tape? Is there anything else specific when you went to designing your own calls that you wanted to do?
The biggest thing I wanted to do, and I thought about this for a while until I started getting into making calls, and I didn't try it right out of the gate. I just wanted to learn, master, how the calls are made and start producing a quality product. I always wanted to try to do something with the ghost cut, because if you look at most of the other cuts, like the combo cut, where there's you know what a combo cut is, right? It's a little gap on a chunk missing on the right hand side, and then there's a little slit, forms like a little upside down V. And then there's a reverse combo. There's a chunk on the other side of the reed is cut off, and there's a lot of calls out there that have cuts, and basically they're combo type cuts where there's two cuts in the call, a big gap missing, and then a slit, and that adds rasp to that top reed. Well, with a ghost cut, all you have is one single chunk missing out of the call, that top reed, and so it makes it difficult to get rasp. At least it was for me. Now I can run a ghost cut. I know I said earlier I couldn't, but I can if I force my tongue over to the right in order to get my air channel more to the right. But it's a little bit of a struggle. But to me, you just couldn't produce the sound of the combo cut could. So what my first attempt when I finally got good at making mouth calls or better at making mouth calls was try to duplicate the sound that a combo cut call could do, but do it with the ghost cut. And that's why I produced, if you're on my website, you'll see the Prodigy C call. That's basically a combo cut that's cut in the middle of the call instead of off to the side like most of them are cut. And so I wanted to give the guys that had a center airflow channel or airflow callers an opportunity to get the sound that a combo cut or reverse combo or a batwing call was capable of getting. And so that was my first goal.
Shane, I'm going to shoot you straight here. Adam's our resident turkey expert. I think every single time you said, I'm sure you know such and such. I've been mentally saying, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. But the good thing is I'm learning a lot from you right now, so I'm excited.
I'm learning a lot as well.
I'll tell you the easiest way to figure out all this out. There's a tutorial on my website on the homepage. It's called Mouth Call Mechanics. and basically I touch on everything we've discussed so far. So the terminology, all about the airflow, and so if you want a really good, I guess, a description of the mouth call, how it works, and the names of the different cuts, go to that video. It's only about 15 minutes long, but I think it's well worth it. And yeah.
I'm gonna check that out for sure.
I've watched one last night where you were actually building a mouth call and showing all the components that go into it, from the die and the jig and the cut. It was just really interesting to see how all that goes together.
That was mouth call mechanics. So at the beginning, it breaks the call down into the parts, and you can see them kind of collapse like expand into like the reeds, a frame and everything, and then they clamp back down, and it shows the call being made. Yeah, that was the mouth call mechanics video. Later on in the video, it gets into selecting calls for your airway and how the call, all the juicy stuff.
Well, after turkey season wraps up, most turkey hunters are actually throwing their mouth calls right back in their vest. Can you give us some tips on keeping the longevity of your call and keeping them maintained through the off season?
I'm the wrong person to ask that, because I get that asked. A lot of people ask me that, and then it's like, hey, how do you maintain your calls? Well, I make calls, number one, so I don't have to worry about maintaining calls. I'll just grab another one. But my calls, turkey calls last a long time if you just take care of them, you keep them out of the sun and whatever. Of course, you can rinse them off with some mouthwash or something to get rid of the germs, and then rinse it off with water, pat it dry, and then put it in the fridge to preserve it. I don't like that idea. If you want to get good at turkey calling, don't put them in the fridge. Keep them in your pocket. I have a call case that goes in my pocket every morning when I get up for work or I get up for anything. It goes right in my pocket, and at some point during the day, I'm going to run that call. If I'm in the grocery store shopping, I'm doing clucks and purrs, something soft, so I don't disturb the other shoppers. Sometimes I get stupid and gobble in the middle of the aisle 10 and turn a few heads.
Oh, man.
But I have, if you're going to get good, you got to have those calls with you so you can run them all the time. I actually ran to a buddy in the grocery store, and I was talking to him, and I had a call in my cheek. He said, "Do you have a turkey call in your mouth?" I was like, "Yeah." You got a competition coming up. But if you're content how your turkey calling sounds, sure, clean them up, rinse them off, pat them dry, throw them in the fridge till next year, and they'll make it through. But the call I ran, what day was it? Sunday. I was down there for the Mid-Iowa State calling contest. That's a call I was actually using back in the spring turkey hunting. I've had it in my pocket every day this year. It goes in my hat at night before I go to bed, and in the morning I take it out of my hat, put it in my pocket, and throw my hat on my head, and there it is. That's how I store my turkey calls, right in my pocket.
There you go, people. If you're having issues like I do, where your turkey calls, you pull them out and they're all melted together, I would say keep running them through the year instead of leaving them in your vest pocket.
I mean, realistically, turkey calls. Well, I was going to say turkey calls only cost a few bucks, but nowadays they're getting crazy expensive. But a lot of them you can still get for $5, $6, $7. You think about what you pay for all your other turkey gear. A mouth call is the cheapest item, and I don't know. I just don't see putting all the effort to try to preserve it. Keep it in your pocket. Practice with it whenever you want. And then go. 3 months later, go spend $6 more and get you another one to replace it, and keep practicing. That's the way I would look at it.
Before we also get into doing some of the calls, I would like for you to maybe talk to us a little bit about the importance of cadence in your turkey calls. If you could just kind of run through that a little bit.
There's an importance in the sound of the call, but there's a lot of importance in the cadence, because I think turkeys identify the sound or what they're hearing is just as much with the cadence as they do with the actual sound. So if you're producing bad turkey sounds and you put it in the right cadence, that will sometimes call in turkeys. That's why you hear folks sometimes say, "Oh, it was some of the worst calling I ever heard," but it's still called in gobblers. So you don't have to be a champion caller. Well, that's probably true in respect to that they probably had their cadence right. But if you go out there with a bad sound and a cadence that's really too quick or really too slow, that, in my opinion, will really hurt your chances of calling a bird, because they're going to be, a little confused of what they're hearing. Is it a dog barking or a turkey yelping? And so I think cadence is critical to producing realistic turkey sounds, but you also got to add realism in your sound that you're producing as well.
So what we wanted to do when we're going to line these calls up and learning how to do them, we want to start with more of the basics, how to do the beginning parts of each call, and then we'll get to some of the more advanced stuff where you're adding some more of these together.
We're actually pulling these all from the NWTF website, so if anyone wants to also kind of follow along and hear what the real turkey sounds like in comparison, you can definitely go check that out. But while you're doing that, or before you do that, or maybe even after you do it, if you could just tell us a little bit why you would use that particular call and when.
I think probably the best thing to start with would be the Yelp. If you can kind of give us the mechanics of how to do the Yelp and then tell us what it sounds like and if there's any like key points that we need to know.
The Yelp is, and I hate to keep referring back to my mouth call mechanics tutorial, but that explains so much in it. And basically, in order to get a Yelp, you've got two parts of that sound. There's the front end and the back end. You got a clear start, and sometimes that front end is really short, clear note. It's almost difficult to hear it. Sometimes it's so short. But sometimes turkeys yelp and they have a very long, clear front end, and then it rolls over into the rasp. The part I mentioned earlier about picking a call that has a cut on the correct area of the top reed for your airway is vital to producing plain yelps and kikis in almost every turkey call you do. And what you want to do is, and Scott Hook actually showed or told me this years ago when I was getting into competition call. I was having trouble producing that clear whistle or that front end of a yelp or kiki, all those notes. And luckily, I had a call in my mouth with the correct cut for my airway. It was a reverse combo cut. And he said, Shane, I want you to pretend like you're a cat and hiss. And so I did that. I said, he said, now put that call in your mouth and hiss again. And so I put the call in my mouth and I hissed. And that clear note came out just like that. And by hissing like a cat, what it did is it drew my tongue up a little bit. It put my tongue in the correct position. It created that air channel across my tongue. And on the left side, my tongue kind of leans over to the left side. And so it was right in that area where that reed was cut. That big gap was cut out of that top reed. So that's where I got my front end note. So before you ever start trying to make turkey sounds, you need to get back to selecting the correct cut call for you, whatever that may be. So once you get all this figured out and you can blow the call correctly and get air across those reeds correctly, you want to basically just hiss like a cat to get that clear note. And then just ever so slightly relax your tongue. And what happens is, as you relax the muscles in your tongue, that little channel of air that's going across that portion of the reed that has the big gap cut out of it, it relaxes and becomes wider to where the point of that channel accesses that top reed where it's no longer, there's no gap there anymore. And so it starts vibrating that top reed. That's where you get your rasp. So you're getting a clear front from that gap, that second reed right below the top reed. And then as you relax your tongue and that gap opens wider, you access the top reed, and so it rolls over into the rasp. And so this is what that sounds like. And you can hear as I relax my tongue, that gap, the channel opens up and I start getting that rasp. So basically to get a yelp, you just kind of speed that process up. It's really quick transition between, a tightened tongue to a more relaxed tongue. And it sounds like this. So once you get that figured out, now you can do the plain yelp. And of course you're going to, once you master the call a little bit, you can change the sound a little bit that you're creating. So there's a plain yelp right there. You'll notice sometimes she does a single yelp and then she just does 5 or 6 more and a little pause in between. She's just communicating with other turkeys by doing that plain yelp, maybe saying, "Where are you?" or "I'm over here." Just communicating back and forth, trying to pinpoint each other's locations or just let them know where that particular turkey is at.
If you could, an assembly call.
Assembly call is basically, you got your mama turkey out there in her poults, and if some of the poults get separated, or the mama hen, or they get lost, or whatever reason, or she hears one of them crying to the mother, "Here I am, I'm lost, mommy, where are you?" That's her way of contacting them, and it's really just a long series of yelps, and then the hen will pause occasionally just to listen for the response from the babies. And if she doesn't hear a response, or if she hears a response and she wants to let them know, "Okay, keep coming this way, this is where I'm at," she gives another long series of yelps. And it's basically to tell her young turkeys or poults where she's located so they can locate her. And she may start off with a couple clucks at first, or she may just go straight into the yelp. And I'm going to start off with a few clucks first. And that may go on for quite a while, or that may be the end of it, depending on the severity of the situation. And if I don't know if I demonstrated it well enough, but you should be able to sometimes hear a little change in the pitch and the cadence of that hen as she's calling. A lot of times it's because she's walking around, she's looking, maybe she's getting a little more nervous, so she's speeding up her yelping, or just changing the pitch of it. And the assembly call is if you can do yelps, assembly call is easy one to transition to. You just do some longer series of yelps and maybe put some pauses into there to simulate that hen listening for a poult. So that's basically all it is, a long series of yelps. And like I said earlier, you can change the cadence and the pitch of the call a little bit, but if you can yelp, you can assembly yelp or assembly call.
Would you ever use that during the springtime?
I don't think so. I mean, it never hurts to do a long series of yelps, but I primarily use that in the fall, and I really don't use it a lot in the fall. I've done some fall hunting quite a bit in the last, 8 or 10 years, and I'm usually doing some plain yelps and some kiki runs, kikis, the younger birds, because we try to scatter the flock. If I'm working gobblers in the fall, I may do some gobbler yelps or jake yelps, and just some plain clucks like that. But assembly calls, I guess probably, I don't know. Let me look at the rest of the list. It may be one of the least used calls that I do.
Could you explain to us how you'd pull off doing the cut, and also what that would sound like?
Okay, the cut. I'll probably use the same call here. And it's a lot like the same way you would do a yelp. You have your tongue in the same position, almost like you're going to hiss like a cat to blow air, but you stop at that point. You basically just get your tongue in the position, and you do a quick burst of air across the call and stop real quick. And you can stop it by either just stopping the flow of air, or either kind of slamming your tongue up against the reeds to stop the movement of the reeds. And a cut, I guess best described as an agitated turkey and a little aggravated hen, and she's doing these loud pops, just to I don't know, to let the other turkey know, like, "Here I come," or "You've upset me." I'm not positive what it actually means, but usually when you've upset a hen, she starts cutting at you and she starts coming your way, and she's not very happy, and a lot of times she's coming in to show you that she's the boss. And so it sounds a little bit like this. And a cut can vary in the number of cuts and how rapid it is. Sometimes cutting is just a single cut every second or two, and some of them sound like machine guns going off there. Pop, 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 pop. And so it can vary greatly, but a cut has a distinctive sound to it. It's a very loud, a loud pop or cut. Sounds like two 2x4 slapping together. Actually, if you've been close to one in the woods, a hen cutting is very loud. It's ear piercing.
Well, in what scenario would you be using that in?
Oh, that's my go-to call right there. If I'm having trouble with the gobbler, I've got gobbler with hens. And he's reluctant to break away from them. I've had so much success with cutting. We were actually there's two hunts I'll try to explain real quick how it benefited. One was a youth hunt, and we had gobblers roosted nearby, and they pitched down. It was early in the season, and they all headed to meet the other gobblers. You could hear hens and gobblers through the woods, and they all met up together and were headed that way to meet up. And I decided I was just going to start cutting. And I've seen this work with wild hens getting near me, get aggravated, and start cutting. They draw in distant gobblers. And so when you do this, it's best just to lay it on, pour it on, and do it for several minutes straight. Don't just do a few cuts and then stop. And so that's what I did. I started cutting. I'd stop just long enough to catch my breath, and I'd keep cutting. Pop, 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 pop. And you could hear those birds firing up. They were just starting to hammer and gobble. And after about 2 minutes of doing this, they finally gobbled and they were closer. And so then I kind of backed off and kind of ended my cutting sequence and just waited. And in no time here they came out. Another instance was I had a hen come in and I was calling, and she saw me sitting in the brush and wasn't sure what I was. And I don't know if it was just maybe she heard my call and thought I was a turkey in the brush, but she was too afraid to come in there. And she was a little aggravated by the situation. She started cutting, and I cut back to her. And between the two of us cutting, a bird fired off in the distance, and all that racket of us cutting, he was just gobbling nonstop, and it didn't take him long to get to me. And so it's been a very good call for me cutting over the years. It's really proved its worth.
Oh, that's really cool. All right, so we already covered the plain yelp. How about the excited yelp?
Well, the excited yelp is basically a combination of plain yelps that are a little more rapid in cadence and mixed in with some cutting. And so it's a hen that she's aggravated, but at the same time maybe not aggravated, but she's really excited, as the name implies. But also a little agitated. Especially, you'll hear this a lot of times when they're coming into your turkey call. If you're out in the woods calling and another hen hears it, it's kind of like, you'll hear sometimes, we'll talk about this in a little bit, a hen comes in doing a cluck and purr. It's really a cut and purr. She's aggravated. She'll do some cutting and purring. But oftentimes they'll also come in doing excited yelps. And this works for gobblers too, calling in gobblers, and they really seem to like it. I guess a little quick demonstration of the excited yelp goes a little something like this. Sound like a musician. Goes a little something like this. So here's the excited yelping. So you can probably kind of get the impression of the intensity of that call and how excited a hen or aggravated a hen could be doing that. And it like I said, it really turns the gobblers on sometimes.
So sticking with the theme of yelps, but slowing it down, maybe show me and kind of go through a tree yelp, how a hen would yelp from the limb and how you would actually do it sitting under trying to call that gobbler in. And some people don't even do it. So if you wouldn't recommend it, please let the listeners know, but let them know what it sounds like.
Well, I do the tree call every time I hunt in the morning. If I know there's gobblers around nearby and I'm set up, I'm gonna do some tree calls to let them know where I'm at. and then I'll ramp it up as the morning progresses. Basically, a tree call, it's just like when we get up in the morning, you're a little lethargic, a little sluggish, and you're like, I think I'll go downstairs and make me a cup of coffee or whatever. It's kind of that muffled, muted speech, and so it's basically a yelp that's kind of muted, and the hen's not really opening her mouth all the way. She's just kind of yelp, yelp, yelp. And so using the same call you do all your other yelps on, you just basically, you still have your tongue in the position like you're hissing like a cat, but you just barely put a little bit of air across it, kind of like the little slight hisses. Let's add a few little pips in there just to simulate some soft clucks. And I changed the pitch a little bit. I got some more whiny type tree yelps, and then I added a little more rasp. And it's all natural. You hear all those sounds in the woods. But that's kind of, you're trying to simulate or project to the gobbler or what other turkeys are out there that you're another hen that's just waking up in the morning and just making contact to the other birds first thing in the morning.
Man, I don't know about you, Adam, but just listening gets me excited about getting out in the woods again. Let's kind of keep going with this theme that we're on here, and why don't we do the fly down call? So you've been doing your calls to the bird in the tree, and I'm assuming next we're gonna do fly down.
Yeah, it's not something I use all the time, but I will do it. I actually do it in the evening when I roost birds, and I try to make them think I'm flying up. So you can do a fly down or a fly down, fly up or a fly down cackle. When I'm roosting birds, like I said, I may yelp a little bit on the ground, and if there's leaves around where I know they can hear it, I'll rake the leaves, especially if it's right at that fly up time, and I know I can't call that gobbler in. I want him to at least go to bed with the impression there was another turkey nearby. And in the morning, especially if I roosted one the prior evening by doing a fly up cackle, in the morning, I almost always do a fly down cackle to let that gobbler know, okay, that hen he heard yesterday evening just flew down. The fly down or fly up cackle, the turkeys usually cackle is kind of an exertion of energy. Just like if you're doing anything strenuous, you may grunt. Here's a good example. Watch a tennis match. And if it's a guy's or a girl's tennis match, you'll hear them as they hit the ball back and forth. Same thing with turkey. When they're exerting that much force, a lot of times it causes them to cackle. Not all of them do it. A lot of times I think it depends on how they fly down. If they just kind of drop out of the tree and glide down to the ground, they may not cackle. If they have to leap off the limb to clear another tree in front of them, another limb, then they may cackle. But basically it's if you can cut on a mouth call, just put a bunch of cuts together, make it sound natural. Try to listen to some audio of turkeys cackling as they fly down and kind of mix up the rhythm of it. Even change the pitch up a little bit as you do it. And so a cackle, I hope this call is going to be able to do it, but I'm going to try and do a fly down cackle or fly up cackle. You want me to do some tree yelps also as I about to fly down, or just kind of build up to the fly down cackle, or how would you like me to do it?
Yeah, let's go through the build up.
Something like that. Not always exactly the same, but you kind of hear that up and down of the pitch as she's flying out, and she's avoiding limbs as she comes down to the ground. She's changing her body position. So, and I don't think you have to be that exacting or sound incredibly awesome at it. As long as you can put a series of cuts together like that, and it doesn't hurt to take your hat and slap it against your chest to sound like wing beats as you come down to add a little realism.
Next, let's try a locator call. So we talked a little bit about owl hooting in the beginning. Could you let a owl hoot rip for us? And could you also tell us when you would do it? I know some people only do it in the evenings before the birds roost, and some people only do it in the mornings and not in the afternoon. So if you could kind of go over that as well.
Yeah, I love an owl hooter for a locator call. I actually use it on up in the day. I prefer it over a crow call. That's my coon dog you just heard bark probably.
That's the coon dog call.
Yeah, I don't take her turkey hunting, but at any rate, first thing in the morning I'm gonna use an owl hooter, and later in the day I might use it. But once it gets up in the day, later in the day, I primarily just try to locate with turkey calls. With a pot call like I was talking about early on, a glass surface that'll reach out there. But in the morning, that's usually when I use locator calls, and it's primarily an owl hooter. And I usually start off, because you never know how far away or how close those gobblers are going to be. I start off with just a single woo. And that way, if they gobble, I actually hear it. If I'm trying to do a long series of owl hoots, I may not hear it if they gobble right away. Anyway, it would sound something like this. If I don't hear anything after that, then I may go into an 8 note of the owl hoot. And if I still don't hear anything, then I start ramping up and adding some of that caterwauling you hear from owls sometimes. It sounds like monkeys going crazy in the tree. A laugh of the owl is commonly called, and it sounds a little bit like this. And hopefully one gobbles by then. And I don't do a lot of the laughing, and not nearly as much as I would do on the competition stage, because my goal is to hear them gobble. And if I'm too busy doing a bunch of caterwauling and hooting, they'll gobble and I won't even hear it because of my own calling. So I try to keep those hoots, the notes. I try to keep. It's hard to hear in my routine, but there's short breaks in between my hoots, and that's just so I can hear maybe the little reverb of a gobble if he finally decides to gobble while I'm hooting. But I try to keep it all fairly short, and I kind of build the calling up until I get to that laughing or caterwauling.
Were you using your natural voice there, or was that actually a call?
I wish. No, that's an owl hooter. This is Harrison Hooting Stick. Hooks makes these or sells these.
Okay. I was going to say, if that was your natural voice, you have probably won every competition you've ever been in. So
this is actually
that was really good.
Yeah, that would be awesome if I could sound like this. But this is actually the call I run on competition. I actually use the same call in the turkey woods. I try to, some people like owl hooter that's just loud. As realistic as possible, but loud. You're always going to make sacrifices with these owl calls. The ones that sound a little more realistic, a little more mellow, they don't carry quite as far. The ones that sound a little raspy are usually a little louder. I'm a sucker for realism in the woods or on the stage, so I use the same call for the competition and in the woods. My thought on that is, a lot of folks don't care that if the owls don't know they're not a real owl. I want every critter out there to think I'm a real critter talking also, and it's worked to my advantage. And I don't want to get off on another tangent here, but I'll give you a quick story where it's worked in the past. I was owl hooting one morning trying to get a turkey to gobble, locate a bird, and I wasn't hearing anything around me. But I finally got a barred owl to respond to me, and that barred owl must have been a half mile away. It sounded like, and when it started hooting back to me, a bird gobbled near it. Now I was too far away from my owl hooting to trigger that gobble, but that other owl thought I was a real owl, hooted back, and it shot a gobble out of a nearby gobbler. And so then the chase was on. I knew which way to go. So being realistic with all your calling, not only your turkey calling, but your crow calling, your owl hooting, everything you do in the woods can benefit you whether you know it or not.
All right, next I think we want to get to the cluck and the putt. And I guess let's start with the putt, and then we'll move to the cluck after that.
Well, we can just skip the putt altogether. You don't never want to putt in the woods. That's
Hey, Shane, the reason I wanted to hear the putt is I want the listeners to hear how similar they sound and how dangerous that can be if you're trying to cluck, but you're actually putting.
very good
So
point.
give us the what to do and what not to do
I
scenario.
feel like I've been set up.
By me?
Yeah.
I'd never do that.
Maybe. Hey guys, watch this.
Yeah, so the putt can sound a lot like a cluck. And if you've been around me and we've talked about this in the past, anyone that's been around me, I will explain to them that's why I always throw in a few yelps. If I'm clucking and purring, I'll throw a few yelps at the end of it. And that's just because I don't want a turkey to think I ended with a putt. You know, if you're not careful, doing a turkey call and sound exactly like a cluck, you can come off sound like a putt. And I've seen turkeys, I've seen them on videos other people post on YouTube where turkeys out in front of them and they're like yelping softly and then they try to cluck and they actually do a sharp kind of putt sound. All the turkeys pop their head up to attention. You know, it wasn't you in the situation you knew it wasn't intentional. I guess a putt would come in handy if you wanted to get the gobbler's head up, if you were ready to shoot him, if he was in range, but you're playing with fire there. A putt could also send that gobbler running. He may not even throw his head up. If he hears a putt, he may just bolt. And so playing with fire with a putt, it's an alarm call. And depending on the severity of the putt or how intense it is, can really put the birds on edge. So try to avoid that if all possible. I will attempt to do a putt. It's not something I usually practice. I actually have to flip the call over, and it still may not sound like a putt. I usually flip it over and try to cluck with my mouth call upside down so the cut reeds are on the bottom now. And I'm also producing the sound different. I'm using the tip of my tongue to press against the reeds, and then I build pressure, and then I release my tip of my tongue so it pops the reeds. I hope that came across with what I was hearing here. It's kind of it's a very hard call to describe. You have to hear it. It's a pop, but a thump also. You can hear it. You can feel it in your body when they do it if you're close enough to them. Now with
it almost feels like they're putting you on alert.
Yeah.
Makes your heart jump a little bit.
Yeah, you can. It's what it feels like. It feels like they touched your heart and just thumped it. I mean, because it really resonates in your body. It's a loud pop, and I'm sure the turkeys nearby feel it too.
I think that's just a feling of your heart breaking because you know it's about to turn around.
I know that sound all too well.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've heard it. I think and since I video all my hunts these days, I can actually verify it by going back and looking at footage. I think it was the 2016 Wisconsin turkeys. I had 3 of them come in. It's the one I posted not long ago. I called it Gobbler Fest because they were gobbling their heads off. And the back one saw me move, and he said, and the other 2 stopped and turned around, and then he putted one more time with some urgency, and they really started getting it, and I had to swing real quick and shoot one. So that's the last time I think I heard a putt. Well, at least before I killed a turkey. They may have putted after the gunshot. Those don't count.
Hey man, if you need some video footage of that, you're more than welcome to come hunt with me anytime. I get to hear it every year.
I'm not trying to recruit putt footage.
Just checking.
How
about the cluck? Let's do that one next.
Alrighty. This is a little more difficult for me to do because I don't practice it a whole lot. Well, I do, but it's more like a cut than a cluck. A cluck has it's a softer call, more of a little poppy sound. But I'll try my best to recreate it. I actually got the wrong call here, Oh, there we go. Now clucks can vary depending on the subspecies or the turkey. Sometimes I hear, especially out west, Merriam's and Rio type birds, where they do more of a pip than a cluck. And it sounds like this. So those birds out west are a little more pippy in their calling. and so you hear that a lot of times in place of the cluck. But it's basically just the cluck is more of a attention getter. It's like, hey, trying to get the attention of the turkeys or let them know where they're at. It's you don't hear it a tremendous amount, I guess. I mean, I hear it every once in a while, but most times when I hear turkeys talking in the woods, they're either cutting at me or yelping at me or gobbling at me. But as far as the scale of how important it is to learn that, I could see some advantages to it, especially if you want to cluck and get a gobbler to pop his head up. Or if you don't want to do a whole bunch of calling, maybe you just want to get the turkey's attention. Or like if you're trying to call to a hen, for instance, and you think there might be a gobbler in tow, you maybe just want to do one cluck so she hears it, but doesn't pinpoint your location. So, I mean, that there's kind of a toss-up. Depends on the hunter, how important it is to them. To me, I like using it occasionally, but it's not high up on my scale of calls to use.
I tell you what, let's go with a key run. And would you actually use the key in the spring turkey season?
Oh yeah, I've used it. I wouldn't say quite a bit, but I've used it on enough occasions that it's you could almost call it commonplace. There's a lot of young birds out there in the spring woods, and in my opinion, from what I've witnessed, it seems to me that gobblers really respond well to higher pitched calling. And so if you're struggling to get a bird out, and you want to throw the kitchen sink at it, some people like to gobble at them, or do J yelps, or do whatever. Try something a little less hardcore and do some key runs. That high pitch of that key and the yelping sometimes will bring that gobbler in. If that doesn't work, then you can go into the fighting purrs or gobbling at a gobbler. Those are kind of your last resort calls. But a key is basically the front end of a yelp. I talked about earlier how to blow the call. So basically, just like you're producing a yelp, never roll over into that rasp. Never relax your tongue, and you get that clear front note. You just need to break it up a little bit and do like a young turkey does. It's a key. It's broken into little parts like that. And so then you can throw some yelps on in. And what that is, if you pay attention to birds that are keying and then yelping, the cadence are very similar. And that's because a key is basically a turkey trying to yelp, but hasn't figured out quite how to do it. And its voice is breaking over into the yelp. Just like an adolescent or a teenager, they're hitting adolescence and their voice is changing. A young turkey is trying to yelp and can't quite figure out how to do it, and then their voice changes and it rolls over into the raspy yelp they get. And so the cadences are very similar. It's a yeep 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 yop yop yop. So you got to keep that the same when you're doing the call. But it's a great fall tool, and it's also a good call to use in the spring as well.
Have you heard turkeys use what I would call the whine call?
The whine?
I'm not going to try to replicate that.
The whine?
Do you use? Yeah, have you heard turkeys what's called whining?
Yeah, I used to raise turkeys, and mostly you hear it when they're feeding. It's usually associated with the clucks and purrs. I don't know how. What's the word I'm looking for? How good it is at learning birds or proving to them you're a real turkey. It doesn't hurt to add that authenticity. But I'll try to do a whine for you. Yeah, so I'm gonna do some clucks and purrs, and I'll add the whine in as I do it. Now I added a little extra there just so you could hear it, but that's basically it. When they're feeding, you can easily go on YouTube and find some footage of turkeys feeding. There's some on my website, I think, of pet turkeys in a pen while they're eating corn or something, and you can hear them doing that little that little whine they call it as they feed. It's not something you commonly hear out in the woods though, and like I said, I don't know how effective of a call it is to use in the woods. I rarely ever use it myself, but I use it on competition stages just to add realism.
Okay, so was that a purr you were mixing along with that?
I was doing the clucks and purrs of a feeding, contented hen, and then she's doing some whines in there with it.
So if we could go back and do the purr as well, that would be good. That's something I've had trouble with in the past, being able to get down. Seems like a little, a little trickier to get it just right, but also seems something to be really useful.
Yeah, and doing the purr on a call, to me, I used to try to find a call that was good at purring, but it seems like to me, once you learn the technique, as long as you've got a call that has some good cuts in it, it doesn't matter what kind of cut it is. I basically, I've been using the same call to do everything for you guys tonight. It's a reverse combo. I key on it, I cluck and purr, I cut on it, I yelp, I gobble on it. Once you figure out the call that's right for your air channel, I mean, the magic door is going to open and you're going to see the light. I mean, all kinds of things are going to happen good for your calling. But basically, and there are several ways I guess you could purr. One way is to blow air across the reeds and then flutter your lips, kind of like a baby. Baby when you. The way I do it is if you're doing like mouthwash or use a mouthwash, you gargle. Gargling causes your tongue to flutter. A lot of people will say, I just flutter my tongue. Well, if you actually gargle, that will cause your tongue to flutter, and I think you get a real natural purr by doing it that way. So place your call in your mouth, and as you're blowing air, at the same time you're blowing air across the reeds, gargle, and that'll break up that rhythm of air, and that'll cause the purr. But you got to have a call with, I could do it I guess you could do it on a bat wing. Any call with that top reed has a nice cut in it where it gives you a little bit of rasp. That'll give some nice purrs. You can probably hear, because you're up close to me, you can hear that some other noises that the turkeys won't hear as I attempt to gargle or get my tongue to flutter. And I manipulate the sound that I'm getting. I kind of close my mouth up a little bit and my lips around the call to restrict that air a little bit and kind of muffle the sound to make it a little more realistic. So, I mean, play with it. Don't just blow air across it and gargle and produce a fluttery sound. Change the position of your lips and your mouth to kind of manipulate that sound and create a more realistic purr.
Could you follow that up with a fighting purr?
Yeah, fighting purr is basically done the same way as you do a clucking purr or a feeding purr, a contented purr. And there's my coon dog again barking. But anyway, a fighting purr is two turkeys. It's not just the males that fight. It can be any turkeys that fight. And it basically is a louder, more aggressive feeding purr is basically what it is. Now you can add some other sounds in there. You can add some half gobbles to add realism when you're doing this. Maybe slap your hat against you to sound like the wings of the turkeys hitting each other and get as realistic as you want to. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'll just do the fighting purr of, say, two gobblers that got close together. And I usually try to build it up. They're just getting into the fight and then they get a little more aggressive. And that's kind of the gist of it right there. And that is a very effective call to try to get those hung up gobblers or those hard to call gobblers. Maybe they got a hen out there with them and they don't want to leave the hen. Fighting purr can sometimes bring them in. It's also a great call if you're hunting with a buddy and there's several birds that come in and your buddy shoots one of them and the other two kind of run off. With that flopping turkey in front of you, if you can do some fighting purrs, that'll run them back in. So, sometimes they'll come in on their own to that flopping bird. But I've had birds run out there and stop and just look at this flopping bird and start doing some fighting purrs, and they run on in. So it is an effective call for calling in hung up gobblers, henned up gobblers, and maybe spooked gobblers from a gunshot, if that's a description for them.
Shane, that sounds ridiculous to me. I feel like that is not going to be in my repertoire anytime soon. Do you have any stories or situations? Seems like a lot of these you do where you can recall using that.
Yeah, I have video of it too. We let's see, what was the one I'm off the top of my head that I know we used it. We used it last year in Wisconsin. Scott Ellis and I, when we hunted there. It brought the gobbler back in, but not into gun range and not into camera view. But it brought him closer after he came in and kind of got skittish and left. We did the fighting purr sequence and it brought him in. It actually worked on a public land bird that we called in. He was kind of leery of the situation. He left. We started a fighting sequence. He came back in again, but never into gun range. The video I have is of a buddy. We were hunting in Minnesota trying to get his first turkey, and I'm not sure which year that was, but he finally got a crack at a gobbler, and we had some jakes out there in front of us and some toms, and they gobbled at the gunshot. And I told him, I said, sit back, watch this. And I started doing fighting purrs, and they started running our way. Even a hen was running our way, and he was going, what are they doing? I was like, just sit back and watch the show. You know, he was kind of taken back about what was going on and how I was able to call them right back in. But they saw that flopping turkey. There was enough male turkeys out there together that a fighting purr brought them on in. They had their confidence up because they had their buddies with them to go whip up on this other turkey that's fighting or breeding a hen, whatever they thought it was doing. But as far as other hunts where it's just brought in birds, mainly I've used gobbles to actually draw in other turkeys. Fighting purr is something I usually use after a bird's been shot. To be honest, we've used it, a few times here and there, but usually I save that for trying to draw in a bird after it's been spooked from a gunshot.
Since you mentioned the gobble, Shane, could you let a couple gobbles rip?
Yeah, and I'm gonna try to make a little excuse here if it doesn't sound so good. This call I gobble on really sounds best when it's been used for a while and the reeds have really soaked up some saliva and gotten saturated. So right now when I gobble, it's probably gonna sound a little pippy, but so don't score me too low on it. I'm just getting the reeds right. Sounds a little high pitched, more like a Miriam turkey, but that's my rendition of a gobble.
I was gonna say, man, I'm gonna score that one really, really high.
Good.
I'm glad I don't have my mouth calls out here. Everybody just laugh.
Can I tote you to the next turkey calling contest then? let you be the judge.
Yes, sir. Get me up there.
And how in the world do you do that?
My buddy Kerry Elliott, down in he's from Kentucky, I think. Pretty sure he is. He competes at Grand Nationals in the Goblin division. He does pretty good. And I went to him and some other gobbler competitors, and I asked him, I said, how do you guys gobble on a mouth call? And the way he explained it to me is to say the word tuh. I guess this is the one time I'm going to use a word to describe how to use a mouth call. But just say the word tuh, tuh. And that kind of puts your tongue in a similar position, like if you hiss like a cat, but maybe a little flatter. And if you just say tuh real quick, you can get that part of that gobble sound. So you just got to keep practicing until you get quick. When I first started doing it, I couldn't move my tongue quick enough. But after about 2 years, 3 years, I think it's about the third year of me playing around with the mouth call trying to gobble, I've gotten fairly proficient with it to where it sounds somewhat realistic. And so basically that's what I'm doing.
And do you use that while you're hunting?
Oh yeah, that's not a bottom of the barrel kitchen sink type call there. That's a call I'd use in the middle of the hunt. I wouldn't be a last resort for me. It used to be a last resort because I couldn't gobble very well, and I did it on a hunt in Wisconsin a few years ago, about 2 years ago. bird just wouldn't come to me. I called in a Jake, I called in a hen, they left the field. Just couldn't get this bird to come to me. He was gobbling well. He was gobbling to my calls, but he just wouldn't come. And so I finally decided, well, I'm going to try and gobble the best I can and see what it does. And I gobbled once, and he gobbled right back to me immediately before I even finished gobbling, I think. And I added some hen yelps or some cuts and excited yelps and gobbled again, and he replied again. And so then I just went silent. And it wasn't probably less than a minute here he crested over the hill and come marching in. And so I was able to kill him. And after that day, I use it often, especially if I just get the slightest hint that this bird's got hens with him and I've got competition, I may gobble. And it's worked once or twice since that Wisconsin hunt.
Well, I know we've almost used your whole phone battery up already. I guess just a couple last things to close with. I wanted to go over a crow locator call, and then if you can kind of give us a quick summary of how you decide what locator call you're going to use. I know you can use turkey calls as well for locating. If you can kind of give us a quick rundown of that, that'd be great.
Well, I wish I had a crow call with me. I don't even know where it's at, but everyone knows what a crow sounds like. I don't use a crow call a whole lot, to be honest. I have one in my turkey vest, and I don't know why. It's just extra weight. Usually I use the owl hooter. But on the occasions that I do use a crow call, I wait. Number one, I wait until I hear other crows in the morning before I ever make a crow call. Because I'm all about that realism. I don't want to be out there crow calling if the other crows are still in the roost or still asleep. So I at least wait for that to happen. And I usually give just like with my owl hooting, I make a quick sequence of crow calls just so I can hear any response from any birds that may be nearby. So I may go just quick like that, and then listen. And if that doesn't work, then I kind of ramp it up and get into some longer something like that and try to elicit a gobble. But that's really a call I don't use a whole lot of. Other locator calls I've used in the past, and I do have one of these in my turkey vest. That's a goose call. And I started using that many years ago. I was hunting some pine plantation in South Carolina, and it wasn't a whole lot of turkeys there. And when you could find one, they were difficult to call in or just to get to gobble. And I'd been using my owl hooter that morning and a crow call, I think, and did some turkey calling. I was walking along a ridge, and I just got through using a locator call. I think it might have been my crow call. Wasn't sure. I'm not sure. It's hard to recall that far back. But at any rate, I remember that I stopped and made some calls and got no response. And I started to take a step, and a goose flew over and said, gobble, gobble, gobble. And I'm like, wow. And it did it again. It honked again, and that turkey gobbled again. I was like, I got to get me a goose call. So I do carry a goose call with me. Occasionally, I will use it if the other locator calls don't work. But as far as locator calls, it's a owl hooter, a crow call, a goose call, and a turkey call is my other locator call. That's about the ones I use for locating turkeys.
And do you sometimes just rotate through those to see what's working?
No, I'd say probably 90% of the time. That might be a fair percentage. I use the owl hooter. The goose is, it's worked in the past, occasionally as a last resort. That's kind of a last resort thing to me. It worked that one time, and so that's kind of stuck in my head, and that's probably why I have it in my turkey vest. But it's not something I use often. The crow call gets used more than the goose, and so it's the owl hooter. I think an owl hooter has the capabilities of getting the turkey to gobble better than a crow. At least it's been my experience. I used to hunt some swamp bottoms in South Carolina, some public land, and I could go in there with a crow call in the middle of the day and I couldn't get a response. But maybe it's just because the location, they would eat that owl hooter up. Every time I'd blow an owl hooter, they'd just gobble at it. Maybe because an owl's more of a threat to a turkey than a crow is. Who knows? But it just seemed to work better for me, and I've had good success with it over the years, and so I've stuck with using it most of the time.
Well, Shane, I was really excited about having you on, mostly for selfish reasons. I lost the CD that came with my calls a few years ago. So I was looking for something else to go off of, and I was excited about having a podcast that we could play over and over again.
Are you
So,
still excited?
man, you did not disappoint. I'm excited about what we got here, and I'm looking forward to listening back several times over.
Okay, I'm just glad you didn't say, "Oh shucks."
Hey man, I'll echo it. Every single year I whip out a instructional DVD or instructional CD and listen to that thing and just kind of get refreshed on all the calls, what they mean. I even have my little 6-year-old boy. He's doing the same thing. Now it's going to be pretty cool to have this interview to go back to and listen to it year after year. So I really appreciate you doing this. Enjoyed it.
Man, it's an honor for you guys to have me on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I really love talking turkey with anybody that wants to listen or wants to talk about it. Or, I like listening to other people talk about turkey hunting. Right now, turkey season is just around the corner. And in the little bit of time I have, I'm building turkey calls. I have podcasts, one form or another. I have may not be yours, but I'm listening to turkey podcasts because I really am into it right now, at least listening to other people's tactics and their input. And so it's kind of an honor for you guys to include me as part of one of the podcasts. And now I guess I can go listen to myself if I want to get really bored.
Well, Shane, I did get a chance to check out the website some, and I know you have a ton of videos on there. You've got actual calls of these different animals that we're going to be trying to recreate out in the wild. And you also sell a lot of gear on there. Maybe give us a rundown of what the website is, and then if you want to tell us what social media you're on as well, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, I think we mentioned it a couple times. It's callinallturkeys.com. It's I also produce I guess a near real time, or how would you describe it? A near real time, I guess, is the best description. Web show, turkey hunting show, and it's aired on the Mossberg YouTube channel, but it's also on my website. It's kind of linked on there, embedded there. Basically, what I do is I travel the country and film the hunts and try to post them up as soon as possible, within days. You can also find some of my content or me on Facebook. I have my own personal page. Actually, that's full of friends, so you may have to just go to my public figure page and interact with me there. There's also a Calling All Turkeys page. There's an Instagram page, Calling All Turks. I believe that's it. I don't think they allowed so many words, but if you look on Instagram, Calling All Turkeys, it should bring it up. There's a Twitter account, but I don't tweet too much. It's mostly Instagram and Facebook, and then my website. So, and I'm pretty reachable. I mean, if you have a question you want to send me, if I got a free second or a free minute, I will do my best to answer it. So I like interacting with other turkey hunters. So there you go.
Well, thanks again, Shane. I can't thank you enough for this time, and I really enjoyed it.
Same here, Shane. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I'm glad you guys had me on. I really enjoyed it.
We're out down south.
Out down south.